Namaste, Witchlings, and welcome one and all. Welcome back to the Yoga Witches Cauldron, where we stir together yoga philosophy, witchcraft, lived experience, seasonal wisdom, and the kind of truth that does not require self-erasure to access. As we move deeper into December, a month devoted to peace, harmony, and quiet recalibration, we arrive at a powerful threshold. The winter solstice, the longest night, the moment when the darkness reaches its peak and the light begins its return. Not all at once, not dramatically, but faithfully. And that matters because, well, this week's theme, Light and Renewal, is not about pretending the darkness doesn't exist. It's about understanding how light actually survives it. Tejas, the inner fire that knows when to rest. Our Sanskrit word of the week is Tejas, and Tejas is often translated as radiance, brilliance, inner fire, vital energy, spiritual luster. But Tejas is not hype energy. It's not hustle. It's not push through and glow harder. Tejas is the intelligent fire, the fire that digests and clarifies, the fire that knows when to burn and when to bank the coals. In yogic philosophy, Tejas arises from balance, not excess, from discipline that includes rest, from clarity that includes discernment, and from effort that knows when to soften. And this is where modern wellness culture gets it wrong. Because too often we are taught that inner fire means doing more, pushing harder, and staying on no matter the cost. But fire that never rests doesn't become radiant. It becomes destructive. All right, Witchlings, we need to talk about my little friend Charmander here. And I promise you, I am not talking about Pokemon because it's cute or nostalgic. I am talking about Charmander because his story is literally one of the clearest, most emotionally accurate teachings we have about Tejas, neglect, and renewal. If you know, you know. And if you don't, buckle up, buttercups. This is going to be a fun ride. Charmander here, our cute little friend. Charmander is a fire type. His life force is visible. This flame on his tail, that's not decoration. That is his vital energy, his Tejas. And from the very beginning, the rule is clear. If that flame goes out, Charmander ceases. There is no grinding through this, no pushing harder, no mind over matter. His survival depends on the flame being tended, not forced, not exploited, tended. Charmander's original trainer in the comic and the cartoon leaves him tied to a rock in the rain. Not because Charmander is weak, not because he failed, not because he didn't want it badly enough, but because the trainer was cruel, impatient, and saw Charmander as disposable. And this is where the teaching hits hard for a lot of us. Because so many of us learned very young that if our light dimmed, it was our own damn fault. If we were tired, we were lazy. If we were overwhelmed, we were dramatic. And if we needed care, we were too much. Charmander doesn't lose his flame because he lacks discipline. His flame dims because no one is protecting it. Say that again with me, Witchlings. Light does not die from lack of will. Light dies from lack of care. Now, when Ash finds Charmy, that flame is barely there. It is flickering, it is tiny, and it is struggling hard against the storm. Charmander is still alive, but just barely. And you know what? If that doesn't describe burnout, I don't know what the fluff does. Burnout isn't dramatic collapse. It's doing the bare minimum to survive and feeling dim instead of dead and guarding that one last tiny ember because you don't trust anyone else with it. And here's the part that matters for Tejas. Charmander's fire is still fire even when it's small. A dim flame is not a failed flame. It is a guarded one. Now, I gotta take a sip. Give me a sec. Now, Ash doesn't show up and yell at Charmander to burn brighter. He doesn't say, come on, try harder. You just need more motivation. Other fire types aren't struggling like this. He does something utterly radical. He picks him up, he shelters him, and he stays. This is renewal, not transformation, not self-improvement, protection, presence, and safety. And this, my witchling, is where yoga, witchcraft, and the nervous system science all agree. Light returns when the system feels safe enough to let it in. Charmander doesn't recover because he pushes. He recovers because someone finally says, I see you, I know what keeps you alive, and I will help you protect it. So let's bring this home. Tejas is not burning at maximum output, being endlessly productive, shining so others can consume you. What it is a steady flame, a protected hearth, and a fire that warms without destroying the house. Charmander here? Charmander doesn't evolve because he's forced. He evolves because his flame is finally supported. That there is lineage repair. That's renewal. And that is what happens when inherited patterns of neglect are interrupted by care. Now, why does this story matter to anybody out there? Well, some of you listening were the kid whose flame had to stay lit no matter the weather. Some of us were praised for endurance and never for rest. Some of us learned to guard our ember fiercely because we figured out pretty quick no one else was going to. So when I say renewal is relational, this is what I mean. You do not heal by demanding more from yourself. You heal by asking, what does my flame actually need? Who or what helps me feel sheltered? And where am I still trying to survive in the rain alone? And witchlings, listen closely. If your light is small right now, it does not mean you are failing. It means you are surviving. And survival is very sacred. Witchcraft has always understood something yoga quietly holds as well. Light is sacred because it has a source. Light does not appear out of nowhere. It is not self-generating, and it does not owe anyone constant brightness. Light comes from hearths, the center of the home, where fire was fed before it was admired. From lamps tended through winter, where oil was measured carefully because scarcity was real. Read the story of Hanukkah. From candles lit for the dead, where flame became memory, prayer, and presence all at once. It comes from fires protected against wind, rain, and hunger, because without protection, light does not survive. No ancestral culture treated light as infinite. That idea that light should be constant, endlessly available, endlessly bright, is a modern fantasy born of disconnection. In older cultures, light was precious. It was guarded. It was shared intentionally. It was passed down with reverence. Fire was not something you showed off. It was something you kept alive. And this is where our conversation about renewal deepens. Because when we talk about light this way, we are no longer talking about aesthetics or motivation. We are now talking about lineage. And let's stay here for a moment with lineage. Because this is where burnout stops being a personal indictment and starts becoming something we can actually work with. Gods, I hate the word indict. Burnout is not just about workload. It is about load-bearing history. Your body did not wake up one day and decide to just be exhausted for funsies. Now, your nervous system did not suddenly become bad at rest. Your spirit is not broken or defective. Burnout happens when a system has been asked to carry more than it was designed to carry, for longer than it was meant to carry it, without adequate support, relief, or repair. And for so many of us, that system learned its job long before we were conscious of it. Your body is not just a vehicle for your internal organs and your spirit. It is an archive. It holds inherited stress responses, learned vigilance, unspoken family rules, and cultural survival strategies. Some of us were raised by people who survived things they never processed. Some of us come from lineages where emotions were dangerous. Some of us were praised for being strong when what you really were was adaptable. And adaptability is a double-edged sword. Because the same nervous system that learns to endure also tends to struggle to stop enduring. So when burnout arrives, it's typically not because you failed. It's because an old strategy finally reached its limit. You done hit the wall. So, burnout. Burnout is a signal, it is not a verdict. Burnout is your body saying this pattern kept us alive once, but it is costing us now. That is not rebellion, that is wisdom, my witchlings. And this is where lineage work becomes deeply compassionate. Because instead of shaming yourself for burning out, you can say, of course, I learned this. Of course, my body does this. Of course, rest feels foreign. And then, gently, you can ask yourself a new question. What does safety look like now? Many, many people fear that changing their patterns means betraying their family, their culture, or even their ancestors. But interruption is not betrayal. It is adaptation. Your ancestors adapted to survive their world. You are now adapting to survive yours. That is not disrespect. That is continuity. When you rest before collapse, you are not dishonoring endurance. You are updating it. When you speak instead of swallowing, you are not rejecting silence. You are adding choice. And when you stop overfunctioning, you are not becoming selfish. You are becoming sustainable. This is lineage repair. Not by erasing the past, but by letting it evolve. Compassion is the solvent that allows these patterns to loosen. Not productivity hacks, not mindset shifts, not pushing through one more time. Compassion says you did what you had to do and you don't have to do it forever. This is why renewal cannot be rushed, because the nervous system must must feel safe enough to release its grip on old strategies. And safety is built through repetition, not revelation. Time to take a sip again. All right. Remember our little friend Charmander here? Well, his flame dims not because he is weak, but because he has been abandoned. Burnout often looks the same. A system left exposed, a flame unprotected, an ember guarded alone. And renewal begins the moment care returns. Care, not intensity. Care returns. All right, now let's bring this into the body, because philosophy without an embodiment is yet another way to float away from ourselves. Okay? Tejas lives in the body, and one of its primary homes is the Manipura chakra, the solar plexus. Manipura is often misunderstood. It gets labeled as willpower or ambition or drive or confidence. But that is a very modern, very capitalist interpretation. Manipura is not an engine. It is a hearth. Now, the difference between a hearth and a furnace. This is an important distinction. A furnace is designed to burn constantly. A hearth is designed to be tended. A furnace demands fuel. A hearth responds to relationship. Logic tracks, right? Sorry about that. Manipura governs digestion, physical and emotional, boundaries, discernment, and self-trust. When Manipura is balanced, you typically feel steady, clear, and capable without strain. When Manipura is overworked, you're going to feel brittle, irritable, exhausted but unable to rest, and responsible for everything and everyone. That, my loves, is not empowerment. That's overfiring. Tejas is not raw flame. It is refined fire. It is fire that knows when to burn, when to bank, and when to dim without shame. In yogic tradition, fire that destroys the vessel is not sacred. It is imbalanced. And this matters deeply for people who were taught that intensity equals worth. Because so many of us learned to equate exhaustion with dedication, pushing with virtue, and collapse with failure. But Tejas does not require self-destruction. It requires right relationship. This is why the practices that support Tejas are subtle. There are things like gentle core engagement, not punishment. Twists that massage organs, not force detox. Breath that soothes, not overwhelms. Pranayama for Tejas is not about hyperventilation. Often, it's about slow inhales, longer exhales, and pauses that tell the body you're safe. Because fire does not need to be provoked. It needs to be contained. All right, here's the reframe that changes everything. Rest does not put out the fire. Rest protects it. A hearth left untended goes out. A hearth overfed flares dangerously. Rest is how we learn the middle. This is why Yoga Nidra Asana, restorative poses, and stillness are not, quote, optional extras. They are Tejas practices. They teach the body that fire can exist without emergency. Coming back to Charmander again. He doesn't evolve because he's pushed. He evolves because his flame is supported. Manipura responds the same way. When you stop demanding and start tending, the system reorganizes naturally. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. So when we talk about light and renewal, we are talking about lineage-aware healing, embodied fire, rest as protection, and care as evolution. This is not about becoming brighter. It's about becoming sustainable. And sustainability, my witchlings, is the deepest magic there is. Winter. We're in the beginnings of it. Winter does not demand productivity. That sentence alone is countercultural. So I'm going to say it again. Winter does not demand productivity. Winter does not ask us to bloom, expand, launch, or optimize. Winter does not reward hustle. Winter doesn't give a flying fig how busy you are. Winter teaches something far older and far wiser. Conservation, listening, incubation, and strategic stillness. Winter is not a failure of growth. It is a different phase of it. And the tragedy of modern burnout culture is that we've forgotten how to live inside the seasons. So, seeds do not sprout in December, right? They rest. They gather information. They respond to pressure, moisture, temperature, and time. A seed buried in winter soil is not inactive. It's preparing. It is learning the terrain. It is strengthening its casing. It is waiting for the conditions that signal now is safe. And yet, how many of us treat winter, literal or metaphorical, as something to just push through? How many of us see rest as delay instead of preparation? Stillness as stagnation instead of strategy. What we've been taught, we've been taught that if nothing visible is happening, nothing valuable is happening. Winter teaches the opposite of that. Oh, burnout is a bitch. Burnout often comes from living as though it's always summer. Always growing, always producing, always available, always responsive, always on. Summer energy is expansive, expressive, and outward facing. And summer is wonderful in its season. But summer without winter is ecological collapse. Fields depleted, soil exhausted, and roots weakened. Well, the same is true for human systems. When we ask our bodies, minds, and spirits to operate in perpetual summer mode, something eventually breaks. And that break is not weakness. It's biology. And that's something a lot of people don't understand. Winter is a masterclass in nervous system regulation. In nature, winter slows everything down. Heart rates drop, metabolism shifts, movement becomes economical. Animals don't shame themselves for this. They don't scroll productivity advice. They don't override instinct. They respond. Humans, however, like the dumb apes we are, humans are taught to override winter signals. We drink more caffeine. We push harder. We ignore fatigue. We treat exhaustion as a character flaw. But your nervous system is not seasonal because it's inefficient. It's seasonal because it's wise. Winter teaches your body you do not need to expend energy when the environment cannot support growth. Burnout happens when we refuse to listen to that. Winter conservation is often misunderstood. It's not fear-based scarcity. It's not clutching resources in panic. Conservation is intentional allocation. It's knowing where your energy is needed, where it is wasted, and where it must be protected. In winter, plants don't send energy to leaves. They send it to the roots. That's not retreat. That is strategy. So when your energy pulls inward, when you feel less social, less motivated, less outwardly productive, winter is not punishing you. It's redirecting you. Winter strips away noise. Fewer distractions, longer nights, more silence, unless you live with me. This is not accidental. Silence is where information surfaces. In winter, the world speaks softly, and only those willing to listen can hear it. This is why winter is traditionally associated with prophecy, divination, dream work, and ancestor connection. All internal processes. Because when the external world quiets, the internal world becomes audible. If you are uncomfortable with stillness, winter will feel confronting. But that discomfort is not the problem. It is simply the threshold. Incubation is work without witnesses. It's the phase where nothing looks impressive because the change is all happening beneath the surface. This is where ideas come from, insight ripens, and the nervous system rewires itself quietly. Modern culture undervalues incubation because it cannot be measured easily. But winter teaches us that the most important work is often invisible. Burnout happens when we demand results before incubation is complete. Winter says, wait. Not because you're lazy, but because you're early. Now let's be clear. Let's be clear here. Winter is not dissociation. Stillness is not freeze. Freeze happens when the system is overwhelmed and cannot move. Winter stillness is not might help if I could read my notes. Winter stillness is chosen. It's responsive, not reactive. It's restful instead of collapsed. What winter asks, what actually needs to move right now and what can wait? That discernment is Tejas. That's inner fire with intelligence. For so many of us, winter was not safe. Historically, winter meant scarcity, hunger, illness, and death. So some lineages learned to fear winter instead of cooperating with it. They learned to just push through, override those signals, and stay vigilant. If winter feels threatening to you, If slowing down triggers anxiety, that may not be personal. That may be an ancestral memory. Winter asks us to heal that relationship. Not by forcing rest. No. Not by forcing rest, but by building safety slowly. Let's bring our little orange friend back to this. Bring Charmander back. Charmander in the rain is winter energy without protection. The storm is not his fault. The cold is not his fault. The dimming flame is not failure. Winter without shelter extinguishes fire. Winter with shelter preserves it. That's the lesson. Winter is not cruel. Neglect is. Tejas is not fueled by constant output. It is fueled by alignment. Alignment with season, capacity, truth, and timing. Winter alignment. Winter alignment looks like doing less intentionally, resting without apology, choosing depth over breadth, and trusting that slowing down is not falling behind. When you align with winter, Tejas doesn't disappear. It becomes steady, contained, protected, and ready. Winter doesn't ask you to shine. It asks you to tend, to bank the fire, shield the flame, and to listen to what is forming quietly inside you. And the invitation here is not dramatic. It is simple. Instead of asking, what should I be producing right now? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? I gotta be doing. Try asking, what is this season asking me to conserve? Where can I stop leaking energy? What wants to grow later, not now? That is winter wisdom. Winter is not the absence of light. It is the protection of it. It is the season that ensures the flame survives long enough to return. And when you honor winter in your body, work, your spirit, you stop burning out. You start living cyclically. And that, my witchlings, is how renewal becomes inevitable instead of exhausting. Exhausting. Sippy sip. All right. In the body, Tejas is closely associated with the Manipura Chakra, the solar plexus, there it is, located, the energetic center located at the navel, deep in the core of the body. Manipura is often misunderstood. It gets flattened into buzzwords like willpower, confidence, or personal power, as if it exists only to make us productive, decisive, and strong in a very external way. But that is not how this center was originally understood. Manipura is not just the seat of willpower, it is the hearth, the place where warmth is generated and distributed, the place where nourishment is processed, the place where raw experience is digested and transformed into wisdom. It is not the engine that forces motion, it is the fire that makes life sustainable. In the physical body, this region governs Try that one again, I'm sorry. In the physical body, this region governs digestion and metabolism, not just of food, but of experience. So this is where your nutrients are absorbed, your toxins are neutralized, and your energy is made available for use. Energetically, Manipura is where boundaries are metabolized, emotions are processed, experiences are turned into understanding instead of lingering stress. A balanced Manipura doesn't just help you act, it helps you assimilate. It allows you to say, hey, that happened and I survived it. I learned something, and I don't have to keep carrying it. I can respond now instead of reacting forever. That's not force. That's integration. When Manipura is balanced, our fire is steady. It's not flashy, explosive. It's just reliable. You feel grounded in your decisions, capable without being frantic, and warm instead of being overheated, and so clear without being rigid. But, when Manipura is overworked, when the hearth is treated like a furnace, the symptoms are unmistakable. You feel irritable, exhausted, brittle, constantly bracing. Your jaw is tight, your belly is clenched, and your breath lives high up in your chest. You're always ready for impact, even when nothing is happening. This isn't strength, my friend. This is a system stuck in defensive fire. You are stuck in fight or flight. And here's where lineage and culture come back into the body. I hate this part. Many of us were taught that our worth lives in our output. That being strong means being unshakable, that needing support is failure, and that resting too soon is irresponsible. So, Manipura becomes over-responsible. It learns to stay tense, alert, and contracted to hold everything together. The hearth is no longer a place of warmth. It becomes a place of pressure. And pressure burns hot, but not for long. This is one of the most common energetic roots of burnout. Yoga does not strengthen Manipura by force. Ow. That did not feel good to that tooth. All right. This is where yoga, when practiced wisely, becomes profoundly corrective. Yoga does not strengthen the center by forcing intensity. It does not demand endless core work, breath retention, or power poses performed through strain. Because forcing intensity only teaches the body that too many E words. Because forcing intensity only teaches the body that effort equals safety. And that belief is what burned the system out in the first forking place. Instead, yoga strengthens Manipura through right-sized engagement. That phrase matters. Right-sized engagement. Right-sized engagement means effort enough to feel present, enough softness to stay responsive, enough structure to feel contained, and enough ease to feel safe. This is hearth tending, not fire stoking. Some practices that tend that hearth. Gentle twists are one of the most effective Manipura practices. Not because they're dramatic, but because they massage the organs of digestion and elimination. They say to the body, you can process this. You don't have to hold it forever. Mindful core activation, slow, conscious breath led, teaches discernment. You learn when to engage, when to release, and how much is enough. And breath-led movement reconnects Manipura to rhythm instead of urgency. Fire moves differently when it follows breath. It becomes intelligent instead of reactive. This is the heart of the teaching. We do not work with Manipura to dominate the body. We work with it to listen, to notice when we are clenching out of fear, when we are pushing out of habit, and when effort has crossed into self-abandonment. Listening to this center often reveals some uncomfortable truths. Some things it can show you. How often you override your own limits. How rarely you rest before exhaustion. How deeply you equate tension with safety. Now, this is not a failure. This is information. And information is what allows change. Shocking, right? All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to take a drink of coffee and breathe. And, haha. Quick break. If you are enjoying this podcast and you would like... Here we go again. If you are enjoying this podcast and would like to step deeper into the coven, consider clicking on that join button and becoming a member of the channel. There are some amazing perks for all of my witchlings, with levels starting at just $1 a month. Also, a reminder that you can help this channel for free subscribing and sharing this video with a friend. I appreciate all of your support so much, so much, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in. All right, back to the show. And we are back. Tejas, inner radiance, does not arise from pressure. It arises from containment. Fire that is safely contained warms, illuminates, sustains. Fire that is uncontained scorches, exhausts, and destroys its vessel. Manipura is the container, and containers are built through trust. Trust that you don't have to hold everything. Trust that you can soften without collapsing, and trust that rest will not erase you. This is why practices like restorative yoga, i.e. yin yoga, and yoga nidra asana are not opposites of Manipura work. They are essential to it. They teach the body you can put the tools down. You are safe enough to rest. That fire will still be there. And we're bringing Charmander into it again. Say hello, Charmander. Charmander's flame doesn't need to be bigger. It needs to be protected. Manipura works the same way. When the system is finally sheltered from constant demand, emotional labor, and over-responsibility, the fire reorganizes itself pretty naturally. There is no forcing evolution. There's only support. A balanced Manipura feels like calm confidence, responsive boundaries, warmth without tension, and energy that returns after rest. You don't have to prove your strength. You just are. And that kind of embodied knowing is far more resilient than constant effort. So, when we talk about tending Tejas through Manipura, we are talking about releasing the belief that intensity equals worth, learning the difference between effort and strain, and allowing fire to be intelligent, not desperate. This is not about becoming more powerful. It's about becoming sustainable. And sustainability, my witchlings, is what allows light to last. Pranayama, feeding the fire without flaring it. This is important. Breath, my friends, is how we tend Tejas without burning ourselves out. And that distinction matters. Because when many people hear the word pranayama, they picture aggressive breath work, sharp exhales, fast rhythms, forceful techniques designed to push energy up or clear everything out. For some bodies, at some times, those practices can be highly appropriate. But for so many of us, especially those healing burnout, chronic stress, trauma, or ancestral overvigilance, aggressive breathwork doesn't cultivate Tejas. It overstimulates it. Pranayama is not about forcing the breath to do what we want. It's about listening to what the breath is already telling us. What a concept, right? In yoga, prana is life force. Ayama means extension. So, prana, life force, ayama, extension, pranayama. Notice what it does not mean, though. It does not mean domination. It does not mean override. It does not mean conquest. Pranayama is a relationship with vitality. And relationships require safety. If the nervous system does not feel safe, breath is not going to deepen. It will guard itself. So, when someone tells you just breathe deeper and your body absolutely refuses, that's not resistance. That's intelligence. Now, here is a truth that yoga, witchcraft, and modern nervous system science all agree on. Light returns when the system feels safe enough to let it in. Fire does not thrive in panic. In panic, breath comes shallow, quick, and high up in the chest because the body believes it needs to prepare for impact. You cannot force your way out of this state. You must signal safety. And breath is one of the most direct ways to do that when it's used gently. Tejas is not fueled by how hard you breathe. It is fueled by how regulated your system feels. For many bodies, Tejas is supported not by stimulation, but by permission. Permission to slow down, pause, and exhale fully. This is especially important for anyone whose default state is bracing for impact. If your shoulders are always lifted, your jaw is always tight, your belly is always drawn in, your fire does not need more air. It needs space. Give it room to breathe. Sometimes, Tejas is supported by the absolute simplest of things. Not because they're weak, but because they are precise. Slow, deep belly breathing allows the diaphragm to move freely, massaging the organs of digestion and calming the vagus nerve. And no, it is not from Las Vegas, my friends. It tells the body, you are not under immediate threat. You have time. You can soften. Extended exhales are one of the most powerful tools for nervous system regulation. The inhale invites energy in, and the exhale tells the system it is safe to let go. When the exhale is longer than the inhale, the body receives a clear message: you don't need to hold everything. And for people who are used to holding, this can be revolutionary. Quiet pauses between breaths teach trust. Not breath retention out of force, but natural, spacious pauses where the breath completes itself and rests. Those pauses are where integration happens. That's where Tejas becomes refined, not frantic. I want you guys to breathe for just a couple of minutes and just notice that little pause at the end of each inhale and each exhale. Interesting, isn't it? I had never noticed that the body naturally pauses until listening to one of my guided meditations. And it said to notice that little pause just before that little spark of energy starts the next breath or starts the exhale. Moving on. Many of us were taught that if something is good, more must be better. More effort, more intensity, more discipline. But fire does not work that way. A hearth fire needs fuel, air, and containment. Too much air flares it, too much fuel smothers it, and no containment lets it burn the house down. Pranayama teaches us proportion. How much breath is enough and when to stop. That discernment is wisdom. It's important to say this clearly, though. If breath work feels overwhelming, activating, or destabilizing, that is not failure. That is feedback. Some nervous systems have learned that deep breathing precedes danger because it was associated with being told to calm down or with moments where safety was not actually present. So we go slowly. We choose practices that restore agency. You can always keep your breath shallow, breathe through the nose or mouth as needed, or return to your natural rhythmic breathing. Pranayama is never, ever, ever meant to override consent. Your breath belongs to you. Charmander's coming back. Charmander's flame doesn't need gusts of wind. It needs shelter. Breath, when forced, is like wind in a storm. Breath, when gentle, is like cupped hands around an ember. Pranayama done wisely does not fan the flame wildly. It protects it. Breath as ritual tending. I just knocked Charmander over. Poor Charmy. In witchcraft, breath has always been part of spell work and ritual. Spoken charms, whispered prayers, breath blown into candles, herbs, and amulets. Why? Because breath carries intention, and intention moves best when the body is calm. Pranayama is not separate from ritual. It is ritual. Each breath is a choice to tend rather than demand. When breath is supporting of Tejas, instead of overstimulating it, you might notice warmth without some agitation, clarity without urgency, energy that returns after rest, a sense of being here instead of braced. This is not dramatic. It is sustainable, and sustainability is the true marker of balanced fire. Pranayama is not about fixing the breath. It's about befriending it, about remembering that fire responds best to care, not pressure, because when breath becomes gentle, fire becomes wise. And that wisdom, my witchlings, is what carries light through the longest night. This season calls us inward. Not as an escape or as avoidance, but as return. Winter does not pull us inward to punish us. It pulls us inward because that is where the next layer of truth lives. And the practices that support this turning inward, meditation, shavasana, yoga nidra asana, were never meant to be productivity tools. They were never meant to make you more efficient, more focused, or more optimized. They are ritual pauses. Sacred interruptions in the constant forward motion of doing. In many traditions, stillness marks a threshold. It is a doorway between what was and what will be. When we lie down in shavasana, when we allow the body to become heavy, when we stop directing the breath and simply witness it, we cross that threshold. And on the other side of it, the mind begins to loosen its grip. Not because we force it to be quiet, but because it finally feels safe enough to rest. Introspection does not happen through effort. It happens through permission. Introspection is often misunderstood as thinking about yourself more. But true introspection is not mental analysis. It is listening. It is noticing what arises when nothing is demanded of you. It is the quiet review that happens naturally when the nervous system finally shifts out of survival mode. In this space, questions surface without being chased. Memories drift up without being summoned. Sensations speak without being interrogated. This is not rumination. This is remembrance. In the stillness of winter practices, we begin to notice patterns. Not with judgment, but with clarity. We review what we're carrying, what we've inherited, and what no longer belongs to us. What are you holding in your body that didn't start with you? What tensions feel ancient, familiar, or automatic? What responsibilities did you pick up so early that you forgot they were choices? This is not about blame. It's about recognition. Because you cannot set something down until you can name it. Much of what surfaces in introspection does not arrive as words. It arrives as sensation. It's a tightening in your chest, a heaviness in your belly, or a bracing in your shoulders. These sensations are not random. These are stories the body has been telling quietly for a long time. Stories like, I have to stay alert, head on a swivel. I can't relax yet. Can't relax. No, something might happen. If I stop, something bad is going to happen. Introspection allows these stories to come into awareness, not so we can argue with them, but so we can thank them for what they once did, and then ask if they are still needed. Because just as trees shed leaves, we release patterns. But trees do not rip their leaves away. They let go when the time is right. Release is seasonable. It is deliberate. It happens when the system knows it has enough support to survive the letting go. And this is why renewal cannot be rushed. You cannot force release any more than you can force growth. You can only create the conditions where release becomes possible. Introspection is not only about letting go of what was harmful. Sometimes it asks us to sit with what was useful and still hurts to release. Patterns that kept us safe, roles that gave us identity, and versions of ourselves that worked very, very hard. There can be grief here, and that grief, we have to understand, is not a setback. It is honoring. Honoring the parts of you that survived with the tools they had. Honoring the fire that burned in difficult conditions. And winter does not rush this grief, it gives it space. Yoga Nidra Asana is one of the most powerful tools for introspection because it bypasses the mind's defenses. In deep rest, the body remembers what safety feels like. And when the body feels safe, truth rises gently. Not as accusation, but as information. This is where you may realize you've been carrying something too long, you no longer need to prove your worth, and your light does not need to be earned. These realizations don't arrive with fanfare, though. They arrive like quiet certainty. And guess what? They stay. Bringing Charmander back one more time. Whoops. When Ash shelters Charmy from the rain, he doesn't demand anything from him, doesn't ask him to perform, he simply keeps watch. That watchfulness, that presence, is introspection. It is sitting with yourself without agenda. It is staying with your own flame long enough to understand what it needs. Charmy doesn't heal because he thinks about healing. He heals because the conditions finally allow him to rest. One of the most important reframes of this season is this: renewal does not have to be dramatic to be real. You do not need a breakthrough. You do not need a revelation. You do not need to figure everything out. Sometimes renewal looks like realizing you're tired sooner, noticing when you're bracing, and choosing rest without justification. These are not small shifts. These are foundational, and they change the trajectory quietly. Introspection requires courage. Because when you stop moving, you have to feel what you've been outrunning. But that courage is met with reward. The reward here is clarity without cruelty, insight without overwhelm, and truth without collapse. Winter gives us the cover to do this work gently. So, the invitation of introspection is not fix yourself. It is what is ready to be acknowledged, what is asking to be released softly, and what am I remembering about myself when I stop striving? These questions don't demand answers. They create space, and space is where renewal actually happens. Introspection is not withdrawal from life. It is reconnection to its deeper rhythms. It is how we stop dragging the past forward unnecessarily. It is how we let wisdom surface without force. And in this season, when the world is quieter, darker, and slower, introspection is not indulgent. It is aligned. It's how we remember who we are beneath the patterns we've learned to survive. And remembering my witchlings is the first true act of renewal. Moving on. Tejas, there we go, Tejas, sharpens intuition. Not because you're forcing insight, Not because you're straining to download wisdom, but because you've finally made enough space to hear it. Intuition is not loud. It does not compete for attention. It does not shout over urgency, and it does not interrupt panic. Your inner teacher waits, and renewal happens when we finally listen. We tend to romanticize intuition. We treat it like a psychic lightning bolt, sudden, dramatic, and unmistakable. The reality is, intuition is rarely ever like that. Intuition is often quiet recognition, a sense of this is right or this is not that arrives without explanation. It's a knowing that doesn't argue its case, and a subtle pull away from something that looks fine on paper but feels wrong in the body. Intuition is not mystical in its origin, it is relational. It is built through lived experience, embodied awareness, and nervous system regulation, which means intuition doesn't disappear when we're burned out, it just gets drowned out. When the system is overloaded, intuition, is not prioritized. Survival is. In burnout, the body is scanning for threat, managing exhaustion, and trying to keep the lights on. There is no spare bandwidth for subtle signals. This is why so many people say, I don't trust myself anymore. I don't know what I want, and I feel disconnected from my intuition. It's not because intuition is gone. It's because the environment has been too loud, too fast, too demanding, and too unsafe. So intuition retreats, not out of spite, but again, out of wisdom. This is why everything we've talked about matters. Winter, rest, breath, introspection, tending the hearth instead of forcing the flame. These practices don't create intuition, they clear out the interference. When the nervous system shifts out of constant alertness, perception sharpens naturally. You begin to notice tension that signals misalignment, ease that signals truth, and fatigue that signals a boundary, and curiosity that signals readiness. This is intuition working quietly, consistently, and, reliably. Here's an important distinction, though, and it's one we all need. Urgency is not intuition. Intuition does not rush you, it does not pressure you, and it does not threaten consequences if you don't act immediately. Urgency belongs to fear, conditioning, and to systems that benefit from your constant motion. Intuition, by contrast, is patient. It will repeat itself gently if you don't hear it the first time. It waits because it trusts timing. That patience is a hallmark of Tejas. Fire that is refined does not flare impulsively. It glows steadily. Tejas does not just illuminate, it clarifies. It helps you discern what is yours to carry, what is inherited but no longer needed, and what is aligned versus merely familiar. This discernment is to intuition in action. It does not always come with words. Sometimes it shows up as a tightening that says, nope, a warmth that says, yes, a pause that says, not yet. And learning to trust these signals is a practice, not a talent. You cannot outthink your way into intuition. You cannot hustle your way into wisdom. Intuition requires listening time, and listening requires rest. This is why intuition often returns during long walks, showers. How many of us have our best ideas in the shower? Shavasana, those half asleep moments, and Yoga Nidra Asana. When the mind loosens its grip, the deeper layers speak. This is not accidental. This is by design. One of the most important skills in renewal is learning to tell the difference between intuition and conditioning. Now, conditioning sounds like I should, I have to, it would be irresponsible not to. Whereas intuition sounds like this feels right. Something wrong here. I need to pause. Conditioning is loud, insistent, and oftentimes shaming. Intuition is calm, grounded, and self-respecting. Tejas sharpens this distinction. It burns away excess noise without destroying the signal. We have our friend Charmander back here. Charmander doesn't know to seek shelter because someone lectures him. His body knows. His flame tells him when he's in danger. That instinct is intuition. And when Ash honors it, when he responds instead of dismissing it, Charmander survives. Many of us were taught to ignore our internal signals. I mean, come on, how many of us? We were taught to override fatigue, to dismiss our comfort, and to second guess ourselves. Renewal is the process of relearning how to listen. You do not have to get intuition right every time to trust it. Trust grows through relationship, through noticing, when I listened, things aligned. When I ignored this feeling, I paid for it. My body was trying to tell me something. Even mistakes build intuition if we reflect instead of shame ourselves. Tejas supports this process by offering clarity without cruelty. At its core, intuition is self-trust made quiet. It's the part of you that believes your body is intelligence, your experience matters, and you really don't need external permission to know. Burnout erodes that trust. Renewal restores it, slowly, gently, through consistency. Every time you rest when you're tired, every time you say no without explanation, and every time you pause instead of pushing through. Your inner teacher takes note and it steps closer. So, instead of asking, what should I do? Try asking, what do I already know? What has been repeating itself quietly? And what does my body say when I stop arguing with it? Yeah. These questions are doorways. They don't demand immediate answers. They invite relationship. Intuition, let me tell you, intuition is not something you can summon. It is something you can make room for. Tejas does not force insight, it refines perception. And when perception is clear, the inner teacher returns, not with commands, but with guidance that feels calm, grounded, and deeply familiar. And that guidance has always been there. It was just waiting for you to slow down enough to hear it. And hearing it, my witchlings, is one of the most profound acts of renewal there is. And here's the reframe that some of us desperately need, especially me. Rest is not disengagement from life. It is reconnection to it. Rest allows integration, healing, and recalibration. It is how the system remembers balance. And remembering balance is the deepest form of renewal. And renewal, as many of us know, is not linear. It's a spiral. It's returning to breath, rhythm, ritual, and the wisdom you already knew. This is not regression. This is lineage repair. Let's check in with the chat just real quick before we wrap up here. Whee! Yep, we're all doing pretty good too. I'm proud of all of us. I'm seeing John saying he has his best ideas halfway into a run when the notebook's at home. Yep. Yep. I will have my best ideas when I'm laying there doing my bedtime meditation. And I'll have a really great idea, and I'm like, I need to write that down when I get up in the morning. I need to look into it. By the time I wake up, it's gone. Yes. Andrea is absolutely correct. Not only to ignore the body's needs, but that thinking of taking care of yourself with rest and boundaries is treated like a taboo. How many of us have set boundaries with someone, not because we don't love them, but because we love ourselves, and we get treated like dirt because how dare you tell me I can't do something or I can't say that to you. Yeah. All right. My lovely witchlings, as we approach the winter solstice, I invite all of you to stop asking, how do I become more? And start asking, what am I remembering? What am I finally allowed to set down? And what kind of light am I meant to tend, not perform? Because the light that returns after the longest night is not loud. It is patient, faithful, and wise. And guess what? So are you. So before we close, I invite you all to join me tomorrow night for our Solstice Eve, Friday night guided meditation and Yoga Nidra Asana, where we are going to rest deeply, release gently, and tend the inner hearth together. Until then, my witchlings, please remember that you are loved, you are wanted, you are needed, and your light does not have to burn itself out to prove it exists. Go out there and spread love, joy, and kindness, my witchlings. There is already enough darkness and hate. Please do not be adding to it. And please make sure your loved ones know that they are meaningful to you. We do not know how long we have them. And those last goodbyes suck. I will see you all soon. I love you to bits. Namaste, my witchlings.